Friends, welcome to Leading Theologically. I'm your host, Zoë Garry. It is my pleasure to serve at the Presbyterian Foundation as the Associate Director for Theological Education Funds Development. In this role, I get to work with our Presbyterian seminaries, churches, and partner organizations that are invested in supporting theological education. For this season, we will be exploring discernment and the vital role it plays in our faith and our lives. Big things are happening, and from that, big questions form. For this reason, this season, we will be focusing on different aspects of discernment. Our guest today is Reverend Michael Gehrling. Michael is the Associate for Assessments and Recruitment with 1001 New Worshiping Communities, a program of the Interim Unified Agency of the PCUSA. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Zoe. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you on the podcast this season as we are exploring discernment. Of all of our guests, you have the most experience in a formal discernment process through the 1001 DML and the other programs that you guys oversee and provide. And so I'm very excited for you to share your wisdom and experience of a very tangible process that we offer in our denomination. So understanding that you are deeply involved in discernment processes, including you played a big role in my own. At what point in your ministry did discernment become an important practice?
I think discernment became an important practice for me just as I was stepping into ministry, preparing for the end of my seminary career.
Mm.
And it really goes back to the story of when I experienced a call to start a new worshiping community before I was even doing this work with 1001. And I remember it well. I was driving a church van after dropping a bunch of college students off at the ministry gig I was doing in seminary.
Mhm.
And I don't think anyone else would have heard this if they were in the van with me, but
Mhm.
I very clearly heard God say to me that I was going to plant a church
Wow.
with my friend Chris Brown, who was a seminary student with me. And I grew up in a church that things like that didn't happen, or if they did happen, people
Mhm.
didn't talk about it.
Mhm.
And I went to college in a pretty conservative,
Mhm.
reformed college where we were taught pretty explicitly that stuff like that didn't happen anymore.
Mhm.
And so I was it was an experience spiritually that I had never
Mhm.
been in a community where that was something that people talked about. And I even, through my formative years in college, had a theology that kind of formalized for me, this doesn't happen, or it taught me not to
Mhm.
expect that to happen.
Mhm.
And so very quickly, I was experiencing God telling me to do something that I wouldn't have thought to do otherwise.
Wow.
And I needed other people in my life to help me interpret that. And so I'm really thankful that there were people in my life like Vera White, who
Mhm.
had been the coordinator for 1001 New Worshiping Communities, and at that time was the Pittsburgh Presbytery staff person for starting new churches in Pittsburgh. And she gave me advice around having some people praying with me, and she told me to start prayer walking the city of Pittsburgh, different neighborhoods, and try to decide or determine where God might be calling me to go.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of discernment around learning to trust that voice that I had heard.
Mhm.
And then also, though, to invite the voices of other human beings into that work too. And I really think that's what discernment is, right? It's listening to God ourselves, but it's
Mhm.
also listening to God through the voices of others.
Absolutely. Wow. It is so true. We don't really talk about the voice of God now, right? Like the voice of God or the words of God are biblical, or for these really mystic or amazing saint stories. But yeah, it's not something that we are comfortable with, at least. I think that there are definitely parts of our denomination or traditions that it is important and talked about, but it's not very comfortable.
It's not. And I remember in the church I grew up in the youth group, sitting in the youth room, and we would talk about, why doesn't God speak to people like this today when we would read the stories
Mm-hmm.
of the Bible? And I remember a friend saying, well, maybe he does, or maybe God does, and we just don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, after having that experience, I am by no means like a clairvoyant or
Not yet.
a spiritual guru or anything like that. I've had the experience several other times, and I've had other people teach me
Wow.
how to be more sensitive to the spirit at work.
Wow.
And what I will say is that has changed the way that I read stories in the Bible, where I used to read the stories of the prophets and the apostles and assume that you know when they were hearing God speak, it was kind of hitting them over the head a little bit, and it would be some undeniable voice that if there were others there to witness it, they would all be hearing and seeing the same
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I learn about my own experience of God and how God speaks, and hearing from others about how God speaks to them, I'm beginning to realize it's usually not that neat and tidy.
Yeah.
And so there is a sensitivity to the spirit that we need to cultivate in ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. In ourselves and also in community, right?
Absolutely.
Where we, thinking of the discernment tools that you have, oversee or help lead. uh, One of the most important things from that was we got to hear from people individually about their relationship to God, about their faith practices. But then we also got to discern that in community and trust that. And so, the discerning missional assessment is one of one of our main formal tools that we have, that's used in the 1001 network, to assess leaders of new worshiping communities. Can you talk to me a little bit about the assessment first, and then I'll ask you some questions that go along with that.
Yes. So
People are unfamiliar with the
absolutely.
process.
Yeah, so the Discerning Missional Leadership Assessment, it's a 5-day long retreat that happens usually in person. Every now and then we'll do one online, which is different. But when we do them in person, which is our normal process, we're together for about 5 days. And uh, in broad brushstrokes, we kind of talk about two different things during that week. We talk about the nature of this work of starting something new
Mm,
and some of the activities that are involved in that, including getting to know a community and a neighborhood. We talk about how we speak about Jesus and how we alter our language or transform our language a little bit so that we're not using words that have a lot of meaning to us in the church, but that don't have a lot of meaning to folks outside the church.
mhm,
Words like Lord, Savior, Messiah, which are words that are just not common to folks who are not church people, or perhaps they're folks who were church people and have been harmed by church, and so that language carries even heavier baggage than just not knowing or ignorance. And so we talk about that translation work that has to happen.
mm,
And we talk about, the work of working with others and building a team. So we do those things, but we also reflect on who we are in this work and what our strengths are, where we're going to have to grow in ourselves, just to really flourish in this work.
mhm,
And so that's the essence of it. And the other thing I would say is that church planting assessments are not original to us.
mhm,
They exist in just about every church planting network of every theological tradition I'm aware of. But the difference that I have seen in the discerning missional leadership process is we designed it with two intentions in mind. One is wanting to give folks every opportunity to bring forward the best version of themselves. And so the whole assessment process includes written exercises, one-on-one conversations, group conversations, more active kinds of activities, walking about neighborhoods and exploring them together. And we did that intentionally so that folks can show up in the format and way that is best for them at some point throughout the week.
mhm,
And then the other thing that we designed the process with in mind, is wanting to make the process value added for the participant. We did not want this to be just hoop jumping in order to get
mhm.
approval or to get some funding.
Check.
We really wanted exactly, we don't want to just check off the boxes. We really want to give folks a process where they're going to take something valuable back with them.
Cool. So what are some of the benefits of this formal tool that you know, 5 days, like, and they're long days. So so for our listeners and our viewers, uh I just got back from helping out for last week in one of these DML assessments, and they are long, and I was shocked at just how much that you pick up throughout this, like, very structured and helpful discernment process. So what do you see as some of the benefits of having such a formal tool?
Absolutely. I when I think about the benefits of a formal tool versus perhaps, discerning our call just with our own community of people
Mhm.
and maybe our own personal discernment, I actually think about my hobby, which is dancing, and I teach a number of different partner dancing classes.
Mhm.
And when I teach those partner dancing classes, one of the things that we do is rotate partners. So if you take the
Mm.
class as a leader, you're going to dance with just about all the followers in the room. If you take as a follower, you're going to dance with all the leaders. And every time we call for the rotation, it's pretty common that there's at least one couple in there, maybe their significant others, or even a married couple, and they came in expecting that they're only going to dance with each other,
Mm.
and they're a little caught off guard by the prospect of needing to switch partners and dance with other people in the room. And what we say to them is, if you dance with everybody in the room, you're going to be a better dancer. If you only dance with your partner,
Mm.
you're not so much going to learn the dance as much as you are going to learn how to compensate for one another's mistakes. And you're not actually going to get better. And I think discernment, when we
Interesting.
keep limit discernment to
Yeah.
just our own people, it runs the risk of the things that we're blind to
Yeah.
still the people around us also being blind to, or perhaps even just kind of compensating for the things that
Mhm.
maybe are weaknesses for us, or they might not want to bring them out or let them know that they're seeing that in us. And so we really need, I think, outside sets of eyes sometimes, who of folks who don't necessarily know us incredibly well, so
Mhm.
that we can get some feedback from them about how we show up in a room and what kind of first
Mhm.
impression we make, and maybe with a more or as close to an objective set of eyes as possible.
Mhm.
Uh, we can get some feedback um, that isn't affected by a long history or by the affection we might have, that our friends might have for us.
Yeah. Wow, I love that so much, because it is true, like, when you are just in your community and you're discerning with your trusted folks, there is that comfortability and even muscle memory of, like, okay, these are the questions that I ask. This is like the weakness or the strength that I know that I have. But that's so situational and so relational, and there's so many different parts of ourselves that we don't know until we come face to face with a different community or a different problem or a different gift. So I think that that is such a great analogy. I love that. Well, I mean, so in dancing, but also in these kind of assessment processes, right? It's sensitive. It's a very vulnerable thing to have something that you believe in, that you believe that you're a leader in, and then have someone um, uh, investigate or ask deep, challenging questions. So, how do you encourage people to be part of the process?
That's a great question, and I will say, I mean, part of it is we make it a requirement for getting a group. So you can make people do a lot of things when $30,000 is on the line.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but more than that, part of it is naming the awkwardness. I
Mm,
don't think any process or any I don't think any process can go well or any goal can really be achieved if you don't at least start with honesty about what the starting point is.
mm,
And so on the first day of these assessments, and oftentimes even before the assessment, as I'm talking with folks who are thinking about registering for it, I name the fact that I know it's awkward. I know it is awkward to have people watch you and give you some feedback. And I even share some stories about feedback I've received in different times in my life. And you're already laughing, Zoe, because you heard me share the story last week about the time I was attending a dance boot camp and a dance coach was watching me use my body and move to music and came up right behind me and said, Michael, why are you doing that weird thing with your butt? And it was so embarrassing. And I share that story
Mhm.
just to indicate to folks, look, we've all been in this
Mhm.
position of getting feedback from others.
Yeah.
And 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 we know that it's awkward. We know that it can feel
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And I share the end of that story, which is that particular dance professional then said to me, you might not notice you're doing it now. You might not think it's a big deal, but if you
Yeah.
keep doing that, you're going to end up having chronic back pain for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. And I realized I needed that awkward moment of getting that
Mhm.
feedback for my physical well being.
Mhm.
And so we tell our participants who come through the Discerning Missional Leadership Assessment process that we are doing this process wanting them to flourish.
Mhm.
I tell folks to a
Absolutely.
certain extent, I really don't care if their new worshiping community succeeds or fails. I do. I want everyone who's a part of it to
Yeah.
find it fulfilling and to be transformed.
Mhm.
And what I really care about, though, is what happens for the leader during this time. Because again, I had the experience of starting a new worshiping community. I had that experience of God calling me in a really profound way. And because of that, the new worshiping community I started felt like an extension of myself. It felt like an extension of my own spirituality and my own relationship with God. And because of that, the success or the failure of the new worshiping community felt like a barometer of my own spirituality.
Mhm.
And so, and I don't think my experience is particularly unique. I think everybody starting a new worshiping community feels like it's kind of their baby, that it's an
When
extension
you
of their own deep discernment and
pour
their own
so much of yourself
creativity.
into it, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So folks want to pour energy in, and then the temptation becomes do everything you can to make the new worshiping community work and maybe sacrifice time with your family, sacrifice your personal health, sacrifice your own
Mhm.
professional development, sacrifice your day off, sacrifice your spiritual disciplines.
Who does that?
Right,
Kidding.
and instead put in the time to,
Yeah.
spend a few more hours preparing your sermon or
Mhm.
prepping for the worship service or whatever it is you're going to do. And so the possibility of burnout is very real.
Yeah.
And so I tell folks, again, I really don't care so much if your new worshiping community succeeds or fails.
Mhm.
But what I do care about is whenever God calls you to the next thing after you lead your new worshiping community, I want you to be able to enter into that from a place of strength and not from a place of having been burned out.
Mhm.
Even if your new worshiping community doesn't go the way you plan it, I want you to be able to look back on this season of your life as a season where you grew spiritually, personally, professionally, and that means taking time to look at yourself. And I really believe that the discerning missional leadership process that we provide can start people on that path of giving them some time to look at themselves and identify the things they're going to need to do to invest in themselves to really flourish as leaders of new worshiping communities.
Mhm.
And so that's what I offer to folks. And whether they're sold
You
on
know
it or
what?
not, hearing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, even just having that voice in the back of your head, even if you're not ready to hear it, even if you're not ready to digest it, having that voice is so important. I talked myself out of it so many times. I mean, we're talking about like all, momentum being so fragile and like you really want to feed momentum and get it going and get it going. But what that means is long nights, sacrificing your weekend, like your boundaries disappearing and having that voice to say like, hey, like slow down, this is the things are coming, things you know just let it come and let it be natural and give yourself the space and some of the boundaries that you need for you to flourish and not just your ministry to flourish.
That's absolutely right. This is a marathon and not a sprint. And there will be times when there will be a late night. There will be times of intense work.
Yes.
But you really have to know
Yeah. and
when
and
that season is and when it's
Mhm.
going to end.
Yeah, and there is overcorrection sometimes where it's just like, absolutely not. I only do, you know, these things, and it's very stringent. And I've always found that the biggest sign of mental health, of like of being healthy and resilient, is actually flexibility. That,
Absolutely.
that like being able to be flexible and to pivot and to adjust is a deep sign of that you're actually in a good place. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. We talk sometimes in this process about the need to set permeable boundaries. That that
Mhm.
that we need to be able to say what we will and will not do, but also, especially in the work of starting a new worshiping community, you know,
Mhm.
you're not going to have an office, or you're likely not going to have an office. You're also not. You're also likely not going to have folks who are ready to call you pastor. In fact,
Mhm.
if you're gathering folks who are new to the possibility of following Jesus in community, pastors might not even be a term that's in their vocabulary or a concept in their vocabulary. And so they're probably going to relate to you as a friend. And you need to find that balance of honoring that those friendships that are developing
Mm.
and also caring for yourself and recognizing your own limitations.
Yeah, I love that. So you have led many others into these periods of discernment, into these challenging conversations that you're just poking at, and also through this very formal process that I went through when I was working with a new worshiping community. So how have leading others or at walking with others in these periods of discernment shaped your own call, and how do you approach transitional periods in your life?
Great question. When I think about how this work has affected me, the first thing that comes to mind is my own understanding of who God is and who Jesus is has expanded so much.
Mm,
And my understanding of what church can look like has expanded so much. God is so endlessly creative, and the body of Christ is just so endlessly diverse.
mhm,
What church can look like and what church leadership can look like, I'm just constantly blown away by what some of our leaders are inspired to do by Jesus.
mhm,
And so, recognizing that church can be restarted in buildings that have been neglected and left behind by
mm.
previous congregations, that church can happen in places like CrossFit gyms or in the wilderness on a hiking trail.
Yeah.
And it's just endlessly beautiful. And
Mhm,
uh, I, I don't know if I was quite there when I started this job 8 years ago. I do know that I was there years before that, where I would see these kinds of things and I would immediately think about what was wrong with it or see what was wrong and
mhm,
see how this can't be really church because certain components that I thought were essential were missing. And I have learned through this work and getting to know so many of our leaders to instead see these kinds of outside the box ways of doing church and saying, wow, isn't God creative that church could happen in this kind of space?
yeah.
So it has really
Mhm.
expanded my understanding. And how I've navigated transitions, I think more than anything else, I mean, I've been in this job for 8 years, so I haven't exactly had many professional transitions in the time doing it. But I think about the transition of COVID, right? And
Yeah,
the
right in the
transition of,
middle of that.
yeah. Um, and obviously there were hard things about that. I don't want to downplay the grief of not traveling, the grief of not seeing folks who I used to see on a regular basis in person, and the
Mhm,
challenges of moving from in person to on Zoom and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I think I learned so much from our leaders and getting to know them and walking with them in their discernment about resilience that I felt more prepared to navigate those changes
mhm.
than maybe the average person. I don't mean that in a braggadocious way. I mean it in the sense that
No.
I've seen so many other people show
Mhm.
me their resilience, and I've gained a lot of tools from learning from them.
Yeah. Well, that resilience and again, that flexibility, right? That has like
Absolutely.
allowed you to react in a productive way, right? Like reactions are good. It's just like, or they can be good, maybe is a better way to say that, where, you need to be able to pivot and shift, and that's really beautiful. I love that. So you have received a lot of lessons and wisdom from the deep relationships that you've built through this discernment process and through this role that you have. We're ending all of our um, interviews with a question for a discernment tool. And I know you have one that you're actively a part of, but I was wondering if there was in addition to the DML, is there a discernment tool that you found most helpful in your call and your ministry?
No, I'm gonna go full circle back to the my first story, and it's really kind of
Oh,
two
I love
tools.
that you started with no.
Oh, did I say no? Whew. Yes, Zoe.
At first, I was just like, I didn't actually hear the second part because I just heard no. Sorry. I know.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll edit this part out. So, I would go full circle back to
Mhm.
the story I shared at the beginning, and I don't know if these are necessarily formal tools, but for me, it really is the balance of learning to listen deeply to God and learning to trust your gut or trust the way God speaks through your body.
Mhm.
Just as an example for myself, I have learned that when God is really present in a moment, I can actually feel it in my hands. It feels like electricity moving through my hands,
Oh,
and I've learned to trust that when I feel it.
yeah.
And I've also learned that that by itself is not sufficient. That I need the voices of other people too, and
Yeah.
I need folks to feed back to me what they're seeing in my own life. And so just recently, I was sitting with a mentor and talking about not a career transition. I'm planning on being in this work with 1001 for a while yet, but uh, I've had this longing in my heart for another new worshiping community,
Mm.
and I think someday it will happen. And as I was talking with this particular mentor, she fed back to me, Michael, it looks like you just have too much on your plate right now to do this.
Mm.
And I needed to hear that. Not so much because I was looking to do it, I needed somebody to tell me no, but because I was feeling overwhelmed at the
Mm.
possibility of doing yet another thing and adding one more thing to my schedule
Yeah.
and feeling like maybe God was telling me to do it. And I
Mm.
needed someone to say that to me to give me the freedom not to do it.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, again,
Yeah.
yes, like trust your gut, trust what God is saying to you, and also trust the wisdom of other people.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of that feeling of overwhelming is because you know how serious it is to and all the responsibility that comes with starting a new worshiping community, or and all knowing that it does take up a huge part of your life, of your heart, of your free thoughts, and just being able to have someone call out to you like, actually you have so much right now that maybe not yet.
Absolutely. And it's not just me, but anytime you start any new kind of community, new worshiping community, new church ministry, whatever it's going to be, it's always involving other real people. And if you don't have the capacity to give what you will need to give to it to make that community healthy and vibrant and additive for the people who are going to be a part of it, there's a real liability of causing some unintended but very real harm to people, and we want to spare folks of that
Yeah,
pain also.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing your wisdom, and also just being able to experience the DML from the other side. I was really impressed with the work that you do and the work that you support. It was Fabulous. So I'll just put out the little plug there that if you're thinking not only of a new worshiping community, but in that place of discernment, the DML is an incredible tool that our denomination provides, and I hope that people will take advantage of it because it is done so well, and it's led by someone who is so thoughtful and so inquisitive and caring. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Zoe. This has been a pleasure.